Hello, it's Rafael Gutierrez. Welcome to our channel again. And hopefully the little buzzing of the fan won't make too much noise. My girlfriend's asleep, and so have the fans to keep her cool. But today I'm going to talk a little bit about stances again. I guess the last time I did Nikodashi. Now I'm going to actually do the formal stances and Kutsudachi. A big thing I always tell people to do is don't just look at karate, but look at every other martial art and every other sport that uses this. Now, some people think, well, no, these are done specifically in karate. And the truth is, if you look, you notice that there's a variation in karate, and a lot of those variations can actually be found in other sports. Now, I'm going to use a specific Zenkutsudachi, which is used in a lot of Shorin-ryus. The style of Shorin-ryu I actually trained in was Shorin-ryu under Tama Sensei for a while, and Tamaki Sensei and Tokashiki Sensei now. The big thing is it's all about balance, and so for that we actually have to talk about certain terms like center of gravity. Now I'm going to tell you something interesting. A lot of martial artists talk about center of gravity without realizing it. It is a major part of it. If you're actually in judo and you want to throw someone, you're trying to get below their center of gravity. And I remember one seminar I went to, a judoka actually called it the tanda. You get below their tanda and throw. Now I actually always thought it was a soft belly, but as I started evaluating what center of gravity and where the tanden and the hara are, I found that it mirrors what kinesiologists and exercise nutritional scientists call the center of gravity. Now, why that's important is this. Every sport relies on center of gravity. And the center of gravity is, as it says, where your center is. If your center is balanced, you actually will be able to maintain certain things. But sometimes actually changing the center of gravity, shifting it, can let you do certain things. For instance, if you think of Nikodashi I was showing you yesterday, if you're standing natural and someone tries to throw you and you drop down a Nikodashi, it makes it a lot harder to throw you. Your center of gravity drops, so they're going to have to drop more. And I know that there's someone who's going to say, no, if you use the right technique, yes, if you use the right technique, but what I'm saying is, the lower someone drops their center of gravity, the harder it is to lift and throw them. The other thing it does is, by shifting back, it helps fight a pull forward. But it also, like a Nikodashi, it also prepares the leg to be able to launch the body forward. So you can actually switch from Nikodachis to Zenkutsudachi and back to Nikodachi and change where your center of gravity is on a fight. Now, it's important to be able to change it. And a lot of times people tell you punch with hara. And if you're using hara as in magical point, well, that's your choice. I'm not going to argue with that. But if you use hara as exactly the center of gravity for the human body, well, then if you're punching with hara, you're actually shifting your body. And it makes a lot more sense, especially if you use this little tool here, makiwara. You'll notice that, I'm going to turn this a little so you can see it more. If you use a makiwara, you'll notice that hara really becomes important if you want to put power into anything. If you're punching heavy bags, you'll use hara too. The problem with using it is you also have to make sure you can stop when you need to. And for that, you need the right body dynamics. Now, there are some people who will do stances different. The question you have to ask is, why are you doing it that way? Now, if you're doing it to strengthen your legs, well, I would tell you, why not just do 100 one-legged squats and get it over with. It's a lot easier and quicker, and you can use your kata and your stances to pretty much prepare you for using your legs and hara, your body weight, your center of gravity, to throw punches and a block. If you want to continue using something and say, well, I like to do it this way, that's fine. But if you're looking for another reason, well, rather than it being functional, it usually doesn't make sense. There's a lot of better ways to work out your legs. And if you think about it, a lot of people will do what is it called, hondo, and the exercises with the shishi, the exercises. These are outside of karate. They're actually people who use this really do develop their body really well, but they don't need to do it with their karate. They can do it off without it. And some people will add it with their katas, and that would be like adding weight to it, and that's fine. But you have to remember that if you're doing a fighting technique, you want the technique to work. So that's one of the things. If you're using something for conditioning and you're happy just saying, well, it's for conditioning and it doesn't work, well, that's up to you. Now, center of gravity is kind of interesting in that you can actually change it, like I said. and it varies. Now, one of the big things you want to do is you always want to listen to your body. So, if something hurts, especially your joints, you really are doing something wrong. And if your joints hurt, what you're actually doing is you're going to be causing permanent damage to your knees, hips, ankles, depending on what joint hurts. If your bone hurts, as long as you're not overdoing it, that will actually strengthen the bone. If your muscles hurt, well, that again is if from standing a certain way, that usually means that it's going to strengthen that muscle. If it's a joint, it's not strengthening the muscle; it's damaging cartilage. When cartilage damages, it becomes bone, and then you end up having bone-on-bone grinding, which is called osteoarthritis, and it destroys your ability to train in many ways. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to do the Zenkutsu Dachi to show you what I mean about Tandan and everything else. So the way I was taught Zenkutsu Dachi is pretty much you can actually go 1, 2, 3 here. You shift and you let your hips dictate where you are. Your knees should be over your second toe, and your head over your knees. Now, if you look at my back, I'll try to step back so you can see. You'll notice that. Let me move this up so you can see what I'm talking about. So if you look at my back, you'll notice that I tend to use a little bit of a tilt here. But my lower back is actually straight. If I come up here, you'll notice that there is no difference in the curvature of my back. If I'm coming up this way, I'm actually putting pressure on my lower back. The way you can actually change it is by tilting your pelvis forward, but then you end up feeling pain in your hip. If you don't, well, that's great. You can use that. But for me, I actually always tell people, have a little lean. Now, one of the things you'll notice is where your center of gravity is roughly 2 inches, 2 or 3 fingers below your navel. So it's about here. Now, you'll notice that it's forward. So one of the things, if someone is pushing me, my weight is forward, and so it actually will be harder to push me, and my leg is bracing, so it makes the push a little harder to deal with. If you think about this, people use this in a lot of different sports. If you watch football, you'll see people here, which would be kind of a Nikodashi, and switch to here to brace, to actually block someone. So you're seeing the same mechanics in different sports. The other nice thing about using this is your hips are free to move. So when you're punching, if you're here and you're punching, you can use your hips here or hips here. If your back is curved, so if you're here, too far forward, then here, first of all, your center of gravity is roughly in the middle. It's not as stable as most people think. It also is pretty much limiting the mobility of a lot of your hips. The only way you can get that is to raise your knee, which some people do, and that's fine. But the idea that I want to actually show is what's happening. Now, I talked about how in football you'll see people come from here to here. If you actually look at some of the intermediate steps of kata, before you actually, especially the shurins, where you will bounce, sometimes come up and down, you'll notice that your knee stays bent. You reach. I'm going to get back a little farther. So your knee bends, you reach, and you shift and turn into it. For instance, for a block. So in here, what you're doing is you're shifting your center of gravity. If someone's grabbing your arm, you're using the elbow as a lever to pull their hand away and your hand back as you drop. Here. Now, this actually ends up being another punch. But the other nice thing is, once you do that, your hips are already ready for another punch. And so you can get that movement. The other thing, like I said, the big thing is using your body. If you think about it, how many people can lift 100 pounds on one hand? I'm sure there are some people, but now imagine having the force of being applied down and another force twisting your arm around. So what you end up having is a release of the arm rather than just a block. And that's one thing that I've saw in a couple wrestling type applications that someone showed me, where they actually use this here to get people's hands off, and so they could do something else. They didn't wait for the entire grab; they did it quick, and they didn't turn their hand over. But if you turn your hand over, you'll notice that if you're smaller and get someone bigger, it tends to work better. Now, why I talk about center of mass? Well, first, if you're using these shifting stances from, let's say, a Nikodashi and going into Zenkutsu Dachi or a natural stance and go into the Kutsudachi, your center of gravity is shifting forward. Now, that means that your punch can potentially develop a lot more power than if you're just using hips or just using legs. You're using everything, and everything comes together at the end, and your arm flies. And so you can actually use your entire body as a kinematic chain, which will allow that, well, pretty much imagine your entire body going into that area of those two knuckles as hard and as fast as you can get it. It's going to cause a lot more damage. But there are problems with this too. For instance, one is it doesn't look pretty. If you notice, you're actually at an angle that most people think is a little odd. But do we find it in sports? And the answer is yes. We actually can find it in American football. I've actually seen it in some rugby tournaments. People will actually be there temporarily. You actually can find it in certain wrestling sports where they'll actually come in and then be able to use that to pull back. So from Zenkutsudachi going to the Nikodachi to throw something. You can also see it in a lot of the other martial arts. For instance, if you watch a kendo lunge, they don't stay properly upright. They lean forward with it. Reason is it gives them the mobility and the normal body movements to get through. I'm not a master in kendo. I notice this watching. I notice judo tends to use this, even though they don't stop at it. They use it temporarily to do other things. And so the thing I'm actually trying to tell you is that while you do have these stances and you can practice them and you will actually feel them if you do them in different ways, you'll feel the pressure in different areas of the legs. For instance, when I do Zenkutsudachi, I feel it on my quadriceps. I don't feel it on my knees, which means the muscles that I'm actually training are my quadriceps. You can't train your knee. Your knee is pretty much bone, tendon, and ligaments. If you try to do something to your knee, you're probably going to do more damage to them. Now, with that said, I am going to always mention any signings or anything I'm doing. And on September 22nd, I will be at the Upstart Crow bookstore signing my book, Off the Rails. If you do have Serious on the Rarest Things and you want to bring that in, feel free. I'll sign that too. Nice thing about Upstart Crow is they have really good coffee. So I hope you enjoy this and have a nice day. Oh, by the way, please subscribe if you enjoy this. And any comments, anything you agree or disagree with, please let me know. And we can talk about it. If you are looking for reading, if you go to a lot of exercise nutritional science or programs, will have a lot of times and universities, they will have a lot of times the center of gravity and what it is. So that's actually one thing that really for martial artists is important, I think. I hope you enjoy this and have a nice day.